Welcome to the YBCA 100 Summit. This is a pretty extraordinary time that we are living in, and this is a pretty extraordinary moment that we get to share together. My son is 14, which means, and I was telling somebody this means that in our next national election, he will be eligible to vote. Crazy. It is a crazy feeling. So in this season, I've been thinking a lot about hope and change. Hope and change. Do you remember hope? Right? Do you remember when hope meant hope and not hope these undecided motherfuckers quit flirting with the racist rapist? You remember hope? Remember change? What did we mean, change? Do we mean change to a state that is democratically controlled by the labor that creates it? Did we expect the end of misogyny, inequality, militarism, and race? Can we expect serendipity? Does change come out of nowhere like hammer pants? Or the phrase on fleek or planking? Like, does change just happen? In this place here at YBCA, there is a lever with multiple hands on it working together to pull towards the possibility. The YBCA 100 Summit is an instrument to initiate and galvanize us towards the other side of possible. Philosophically, we begin by considering the work of this cat named Steven Johnson, who writes about the natural history of innovation in a way that suggests that the urban context can and has replicated patterns of evolution and growth that we find in nature. So for instance, all the elements that were present in the planet's primordial soup might have randomly collided to create complex compounds, but you couldn't go from methane and ammonia to the Empire State Building like that, right? You could go from methane and ammonia to Donald Trump like that, though. Similarly, you couldn't have built an iPhone in 1869, even if you had the idea and design for one. There are a series of combinations and evolutionary steps that had to occur first in order to bring the idea to bear. So this next level of possible combinations forms what Johnson calls the adjacent possible. At any moment, the world is capable of incredible change, but only certain changes can happen. Johnson says a new idea is a network of cells exploring the adjacent possible. So the design question here in this building as change agents is not how to generate audience or revenue, but how to generate networks in service of probing the adjacent possible. You can imagine that YBCA is positioned to work like most cultural institutions, connecting to its environment through the supremacy of its own aesthetics, driven by a mission to provide socially engaging content, less than intentionally impacting its social environment through active, energetic reciprocity. The broad question here is, how can artistic vision transform community? And can we connect this perhaps to the relationship between artistic vision and strategic vision? Is it possible to pedagogically choreograph social justice? Is it possible? Can we design a social practice built on the instigations of a curated few? Can we manage the life cycle of an idea, build an ecosystem of creative individuals to respond to that idea, nurture those responses with artistic interactions, and then harvest the results in the form of public policy? Maybe The thing that is more powerful than private funds is public will. So when YBCA describes its mission as generating culture that moves people, the bet that we're making is that we can activate how art influences the public imagination. We can design a process where dynamic inquiry spawns culture. And as Jeff Chang distills, culture precedes policy. So we have this curatorial design that you are now inside of. And it begins with the belief that social change begins with the artists and creative minds in the world that are asking the right catalytic questions. And we can organize our community to refine, reframe, and respond to those questions in a way that can seduce the public will. So, yeah, that. Thanks. So my story is this. I don't really trust art that doesn't bleed or sweat or cry. I imagine my kids might live in a time when the most valuable commodities are fresh water and empathy. I love pretty dances and majestic sculpture as much as the next guy, but give me something else to go with it. Lift me up with the aesthetic sublime. Give me the tools to redeem inspiration. And that's what today does. Today is a day to begin redeeming our inspiration. We don't necessarily believe in hermetically sealed art spaces full of objects that you love but don't reach out to touch you back. Art isn't other, it is of us, and it must be integrated into the cycle of social progress in a systemic way. So the belief here is that artists can't go off in isolation and be weird or creative or whatever, and then come back from Artist Island with basketfuls of transformation for us to pick and eat and be changed by, right? So as a staff and board, and if you're a member of the YBCA staff, can you just like raise your hand or do a ooh, ooh, or like throw your fist up? So the staff at YBCA is boss, and wow, 7 months ago now, we all undertook a collective exercise of identifying 100 individuals, ideas, and organizations that we believe are pushing culture forward. Specifically towards this idea of the adjacent possible. And we've brought several of these folks here today. If you're a member of the YBCA 100, can you please raise your hand or throw up a fist? Or I must confess to you that before we came into this room, we had brunch with our YBCA 100 honorees, and the feeling in the room was this thing that I'm talking about in terms of the adjacent possible. You ever have like the kind of tingle, like, oh, I'm in a world-changing moment. Yeah, that's what it's like to be close to you all, especially in the aggregate. So thank you again and again for your inspiration. That said, the YBCA 100 isn't just a list of fly people, it's a living document. It's a living document for our community to reference and deepen in the course of our collective movement and practices. We in this room are collectively implicated, right? So this is where we all come in, and what you must do throughout the day. We've identified 10 members of the YBCA 100 that will serve as instigators. They'll talk about their work, and maybe more importantly, they'll talk about the questions that provoke their work. So your responsibility today is to reflect on those questions, debate and parry with them in small groups, and then evolve those questions in this public forum. A culture of inquiry, a practice of prototype, a generation of movement. Let me give you a moment to practice. Some of you have heard this question before. Turn to somebody near you, and in the next 2 minutes, respond to this question. How does my labor generate dignity for myself or for others? How does my labor generate dignity for myself or for others? I will give you 2 minutes either to respond to that question or to come up with a better one based on the question I just gave you. All right? There's a timer right here. You got 2 minutes. Let's go.